Hey everybody, apologies. There seems to be a technical issue. I don't know why, but I'm not. I should be. The link has changed. Let me just. Hey Andrew, welcome aboard. Yeah, there's a little technical glitch. The link that it was supposed to be is not what it was. So I don't know why. We're just going to give folks another minute. I put this link in the old description, so we'll see. We'll see how that works. But for some reason, things are not what they should be. Okay, now we're getting folks here. Hey, everybody, apologies for the technical glitch. We're just going to give another minute. I don't know why it wouldn't let me add. It wouldn't let me start the chat. Satori, hey, Nick, Andrew, Satori. I know you were on the old thing. This is on a new link, correct? This is not in the official link that I had sent out, right? Yeah, I'm sorry. I did put the link to this um, in the chat of the old one, so hopefully people will be able to find it. I don't know what happened. It just wouldn't let me start the other one. I've been having all manner of problems with this, but hey, I'm on now. So, hey everybody, welcome aboard. Thank you all for coming. Sorry for the issues. Our December full moon madness. The moon is obviously affecting me. So I just wanted to thank you all for coming. I see we've got a whole bunch of people here. So I just want to briefly touch on conventions because I have just been to 3 conventions in the last 5 weeks. And oh my God, am I tired of conventions. I had I had a lot of fun at each convention and I did well. But um, my God, having those back to back and back, uh, having those back to back things is just it's ruinous. And then of course I had PAX Unplugged this past weekend in Philadelphia. I don't know if you all got a chance to see the post I made on the blog side with all the pictures of the Christmas parade and everything. Hey Howard, welcome aboard. Yes, Rivers. It was a mask mandatory convention, which is unusual nowadays. Those have been kind of trailing off, but it was it was it was a good con. What I noticed, which was really weird, is that I didn't make a lot of profit at the con because the overhead was so high. The cost of a table and various things like that. It was so high that I actually ended up making more money at a much smaller con a couple weeks earlier, and that combined with just the big hassle of going to this ginormous con, it was an interesting experience. From a business standpoint, from my standpoint, it's just not worth it because for me, conventions are a revenue stream. I don't go to conventions that I don't make money at, and fortunately, I make money at almost every convention I go to, so which is nice. But hey, Ryan, hey, Aaron, I'll get to all the questions and such soon enough. And yes, Satori, for whatever reason, you're gonna have to wait 60 seconds before making another comment. I apologize for that. Part of this whole glitchiness. And now that it's started, I don't want to mess with it by changing any settings or anything. Um, but yeah, so it was a very odd thing. I mean, I know that PAX Unplugged is not my it's not my core audience. It's not a lot of old school players. Everybody there is either there for board games or fifth edition, um, or some of the newer games and such. I know there were a couple other old school publishers there. Goodman Games was there. Cobalt Press was there. I don't know if Chaosium counts as an old school press, but it does for me. They were there. They had a big old thing, but it was mostly um, board games and newer players. But the good news is that when you have a book that has the orange spine, it kind of acts as a magnet. And I got a lot of people saying, "Wow, I didn't realize anybody still played first edition," which was really a nice thing. It's interesting that the stuff that I sold the most was the 5e or 5e compatible stuff. So I have got a version of Castellan Archmage that is a 5e dungeon. In addition, I just happen to have it here for reasons I will relate in a moment. The random terrain and encounter generator is pretty generic, so that sold pretty well too. But but it was a decent amount of people saw the old stuff and wanted to get into it. And what struck me was that there were a bunch of young people, like in their late teens or early 20s, and they swarmed the table and they said, "We play first edition." And it wasn't just one group. This kept happening all weekend long as I'd get one or two young people, like under half my age, that say they play first edition, and I love it. I don't know how it happened. I don't know why they're playing first instead of fifth, but they are. So that gives me some hope for the OSR in general, that there is actually this hunger for it. So let me now that I've said my piece about the cons, let me start going through some of this. Howard, the party has just completed. Oh yes, very cool. Oh, you put the Desert of Desolation into the Sea of Dust. That works. I can see that. Aaron, how did old school D&D handle getting insane amounts of loot to buy strongholds? You need to look at those treasure tables in the back of the monster manual. Some of the amounts of treasure that monsters have is just insane. And the reason you can do that is because there were these enormous drains on character resources. I mean, remember, you're supposed to pay thousands of gold pieces to go up levels for training. That's thousands per level. So so there were a lot of ways that the DM can take away money. One of them is building a stronghold. And when you look at those treasure tables, when you see just the thousands and plus gems, remember gems, you roll on a table to see what the gem is worth. You could have a gem worth 10,000 gold pieces in a regular horde. It's just the randomness of the treasure system affords that ability to hoard huge amounts of treasure to afford that kind of thing. Satori, do I get paid by selling my modules or DMing at conventions? Well, I get obviously I get paid. I get paid when I sell my stuff because I own the company. So I sell my modules and the books and everything like that. So it is definitely a source of income for BRW Games. I know there are a lot of game companies that approach conventions as marketing opportunities. They go in there knowing they're going to take a loss just because they want to get their face out there. That never made a lot of sense to me, because if you're not selling enough product at the convention, the odds that people are going to see you and then buy stuff later is very limited. I don't see that happening, and I don't see a big bump after I'm at a convention. People take the business cards, they say, "Oh yes, I'm going to buy this when I get home. I don't want to take it on the plane," but there's never that sales bump the week or two following. So I think that's a fallacy personally. But hey, it's their business if they want to, go to conventions and blow a couple $1,000s just to get their, just to keep their face current, that's, to get their name out there. That's fine. But I don't see that as a viable strategy, at least at my level. If I was a much larger publisher, then maybe I would have that spare cash cushion to be able to afford that. But for me, I have to evaluate everything on, is this costing me money? And if so, will I make that money back? And, I have a different standard when it comes to conventions. So, alrighty. One of the players was knighted, completing Temple of Elemental Evil. Excellent, using their loot to be able to keep in the Cron Hills. Yeah, it would be interesting to see what Bernie and Rufus have to say. Are they, because they're the ones who are the official, Hamlet keep. It might be interesting to see if they get a little jealous, or if they, or if they're friendly towards this character or something like that. I can see a couple of different ways that it would go. Nick Davis, welcome aboard. My weekly game is in the city of Greyhawk currently, but might set out northward to the Cairn Hills. Excellent. Very cool. Sounds neat. Troll Lords were not at PAX Unplugged, Ryan. Like I say, Goodman was there, but Trolls were not. And so was Kobold. Thank you very much, Mickey the Goat Cat. I appreciate the thought. Hey, Rubens, good to see you. Thank you all. I'm sorry it had to get moved from one link to another, but it's working out. Nick Davis just purchased the Star Cairns and do like them. Is there a more simi? I'm not really sure what that word is. I know it's a typo, but I don't know what it's supposed to be. Is there a more something cairn that came either with the box set of Greyhawk? No, they're really, as far as I remember, there's nothing directly relating to the Cairn Hills in the City of Greyhawk box set, or any of the box sets that I can remember. Hey, Nordic Maelstrom, welcome aboard. Flint Fireforge, good to see you. Thank you for coming all the way from the Forgotten Realms. Ryan Matthews, they're probably broke by the time they get back. Yeah. We'll see about that. Nick, my group took over the Moat House and is remodeling it as their hideout. That's an interesting thing. I've never actually heard of anybody doing that. That's a really cool idea. I don't think that Rufus and Bernie have all that large domain. No, they have. Their domain is basically they have that town. They have that keep in the village of Hamlet, basically to keep an eye on things for the Viscount of Verbabank. Can I comment, Dr. Urius Papers 2020? Can I comment on the Amadeo Jungle and Kuluk Mar? Nope, because I don't know what that is. So no, I cannot comment on that. Nordic Maelstrom, what are we discussing now? Right now, I'm just kind of rambling about conventions and answering questions. We do have a topic later on, which is going to be alternate scenarios for old school classic modules. If I find myself with a lack of something to talk about. Rick, thank you very much for coming. Welcome aboard. It's so great to see you. It's so great to see all new people coming on board. And just remember, if you haven't already subscribed, please do hit the subscribe button. It really does help. Flint Fireforge, Hickory, okie dokie. It's hard to keep them straight sometimes. Nordic Maelstrom, never been to a convention, really. Wow. My first convention was Atlanticon in 79 or 80, something like that. I was about 13 or 14, and I pestered my dad, or it might have been 78. I pestered my father to bring me. We went down for a day. It was in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Me and my best friend Tom, we had taught each other how to play D&D from the blue box from the Holmes Basic set. And we went down there, and it was a grand old time. We'd already been playing war games for a couple of years, the SPI and Avalon Hill, so we kind of gravitated towards that. But there was a lot of D&D stuff going on. It was really cool. But it's interesting that you've never been to a convention. I'm curious when it lets you. I'd be interested to know why you never felt the desire to go to one. The big thing I get out of conventions nowadays, and I'm talking about ones that I'm not vending at, because I have a strict demarcation. I'm either a vendor or a player. I don't like to play or run games at cons that I'm a vendor at, because I've tried it and I suck. Because I am so wiped. I'm so tired and exhausted from selling all day long that the last thing I want to do is run a game at a table. All I want to do is sit in the bar and have a beer and a burger and just relax. And I've tried it. I did it at GaryCon, and I know I was a subpar DM because I was just so tired. I'm sure other people can do it. It's not my thing. I love to go to cons to play things, but when I am there as a player, a lot of times what I'll do is I will go I will seek out games I've never played before. Especially I do this at wargaming conventions where I go to Historicon and Fall In and things like that, and I go to play games I've never played before, because this is my opportunity to, right? I can experiment, I can test them out, I can see how much I like them, and if I do like them, I can buy them and then buy the stuff for them. I approach RPG cons a little bit differently. Those I usually go to people that I know already, or if it's a Greyhawk thing, I'll obviously gravitate towards that. But I also at RPG cons, if there's something new and exciting that I've heard about that I want to try, that's very much outside my comfort zone, I will go for that as a game. All right, let me scroll back up here. Wasn't there an adventure card in the city? It's very possible, Andrew, that there was an adventure card. I don't recall one way or the other. James, I live in New Jersey. So going to Philadelphia was only about a 2-hour drive, and I go to Massachusetts and Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Mepicon, and things like that. So it's a lot of fun. There's a mini adventures outlined. Stormland of the okay. Okay, yeah, Nick, thank you for chiming in there. There is an adventure card with a sample cairn. Flynn, I am still on the fence for GaryCon, and GaryCon's a unique thing for me because it's such a long trip, and I have to take almost an entire week off from work to get there. I almost have to go as a vendor to justify going. But I know I'm not a vendor at 2023, so I might skip this year, which sucks. But I might go next year, 2024, if I can swing it. I don't know. I'm still on the fence. I've got a hotel room, but I'm just not sure, and I'll know by the end of the month if I'm heading there. Hey, Patrick, good to see you. Thanks for coming. Welcome aboard. Ryan just bought a house. I found when we first bought our house, we got a whole bunch of credit card offers, so you might have an option there. TR30 349. Good evening. Welcome aboard. Good to see you. First con was Gen Con in 85. Yeah, that's I remember I went to a bunch of Gen Cons when they were still in Minneapolis, I think. Not the one before they went to Indianapolis. I have not been to an Indy Gen Con. Last one I went to, I think, was 89 or 88, something like that. So I've never been. So GaryCon is a fantastic convention. I wholeheartedly endorse it. The only rough spot, as far as I'm concerned, from a player standpoint, is that it's really tough to get into the hotel. And from a vendor side, I know they moved the vendor hall like way out to the end of the tip of the hotel, and that's kind of weird. But the con as a whole is a fantastic experience, and I wholeheartedly recommend it if you can make it to GaryCon. Nordic Maelstrom, the reason is that I've never had a gaming group that lasted so long, so I never felt the desire to go to conventions. There's actually that's actually a reason to go to conventions, because you don't need to have a stable group, right? You've got the whole convention. You can play 4 or 5, maybe even 6 full games in the course of a weekend, without the benefit of a stable group. So, if the problem is you don't have anybody to play with, the convention is actually exactly the answer for that issue. Let's see. Satori, Gary Khan, that's my dream, long away from France. Yes, quite a bit away from France, although I know people who do make the journey from all kinds of places. Love to play in Gary's house. Yes, there is something there. The person who owns Gary's old house does rent it out for that purpose. That would just be the dream. Play on Gary's porch or in his basement. The sand table would be amazing. Ryan was wondering if Trolls had any updates on the fulfillment of Memorial Tomb. I have not heard anything about that in a while. I know I got a bunch of PDFs a couple of weeks ago. So I presume they're moving forward on it, because I've been getting more stuff from them, because I went on the Kickstarter too for Memorial Tomb, and I'm getting stuff. So I would assume that it's still on track. Nordic Maelstrom. Yes, my God, I gotta say, I am not a fan of Philadelphia. Either as a walking city or as a driving city. Certainly not as a parking city. I was unimpressed. The buildings are beautiful. I was right downtown by the city hall, where they have this great neoclassical architecture and stuff. So the buildings themselves are gorgeous. And I ended up going to what I think is the oldest bar in North America, from the 19th century. It was loud, pumping music, bunch of 20-somethings. It felt just like being in college again, except I'm not. So it was weird. Let's see. Yeah, Sabong, whatever, however you pronounce that. Yes, absolutely. Go to Gary Con if you can. It's a terrific place, terrific con. Patrick, am I still acquiring game material? Yes, I still buy new games, new books, certainly new figures. I don't know if you guys can see the miniatures table here, but this is the army of Hardby right here on the mat, waiting to be painted. So over the last couple of months, I've been buying ginormous quantities of 15 millimeter medieval and fantasy figures for my Greyhawk Battles game, which I hope to be rolling out at conventions either next year or the following year. So, if you want to play the Battle of the Grand Wood or Emerald Meadows or any number of a whole bunch of different other famous battles from the history of Greyhawk, I'm going to be having that. So, that's going to be my new con experience, is running these games of Greyhawk war game scenarios, which is going to be, I think it's a lot of fun. Michael Stronghold, welcome aboard. I've never been to a con. I always wanted to play a tournament style AD&D game. Well, Gary Con's the place to do it. North Texas, I'm sure they have a ton of first edition stuff. And remember, if your first edition is also Osric and Labyrinth Lord, all of those are pretty much the same mechanically. So it's you're going to get the same kind of experience. I wouldn't hold out for something in the catalog that says AD&D first edition. I would go with any one of a dozen different OSR games will give you pretty much the same experience. So don't hold out for perfection on that, but it's definitely conventions are the place to do it. Howard, you have to leave apologies. Oh, yes, off to your game. That is a great excuse. Is that you have a game and a new player? That's wonderful. Have a great time. TR349 went to Gen Con, 85 to 95. Yeah, that's I was more 82 to 89 ish, somewhere in there. So we definitely overlapped. Dr. David Howard, welcome aboard. Gen Con 82. Yeah, I think that's a little earlier. I think my first Gen Con was 83 or 84. So let's see what else we got here. Gary Con is too far from Brazil. Rubens, welcome back. Good to see you again. Patrick, I find myself still buying books, and room is becoming an issue. Yes, Howard, it is. It's McGillen's Old Ale House. That is the one. Lots of loud music, lots of young, attractive 20-something, I presume, college students or just out of college students, and a very decent hamburger, which I was very pleased to get. Yes, Ryan, Castles and Crusades absolutely falls into that category. I put Castles and Crusades into the OSR category just by default. But yeah, Patrick, if you can see, the shelves behind me are completely filled, and I've taken to sticking stuff into odd places, and yeah, I suffer the same problem. I buy more than I use, and I am loath to get rid of it. So anyway, anywho, so I did have a bit of an idea for a topic today. Okay, we still got Nick. Have I ever run a campaign that spent a considerable time in the city of Greyhawk? Yes, I have. The way, I mean, it's difficult. I don't really have a system when it comes to city campaigns. I just kind of kept track of it in my mind. A lot of stuff that there are ways that there are things that can help you. I used a lot of the old TSR Lonkmar material. When they had the license for Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, they came out with a ton of terrific urban adventures and game aids and stuff like that. And I used them extensively to fill in stuff from the city of Greyhawk. But in terms of keeping track of encounters and stuff, I just kind of, because I play such a freewheeling improvisational style, I just kind of jot down notes as I go, and I rely on my memory for what has gone before. So I don't really have a system per se, and sometimes a player will correct me on something, and I'll just, fine, I'll just hand wave it, and go back to what I had said originally. But yeah, I really don't have a system. But if you are doing a Greyhawk City campaign, tracking down those old TSR Lonkmar things, and in fact, the Goodman Games Lonkmar stuff is a little mechanically a little different, but it's the material itself is just first rate. So I would get that too. All right, take it easy, Howard. Have a great game. Let's see. Nordic Maelstrom, what is my favorite edition of D&D to play and collect? Well, I'll give you a hint, and it has an orange spine. First edition, absolutely without fail. That's the edition I really grew up with. It wasn't the first edition I played, but it's certainly the edition I played the most. That's what we had in high school and college, and that's what I went back to after second edition and the Air Force. So I first edition for me all the way. And the reason I like first edition, and this actually came up at the con, people ask me why. And I like first edition because, well, aside from the fact that I can run it without the books, I know the system enough. It's very tinkerable. I can play with the subsystems in AD&D in a way that you really can't do in 5th edition or 4th or even 3rd, because first edition is made up of a bunch of subsystems, right? It's you've got one subsystem for combat over here, and another subsystem for magic over there, and another subsystem for spell research over here, and on and on and on and on. And they're all a bunch of black boxes. So you can take out the combat system and you can put in another combat system from a different game or your own game, and it doesn't break the other stuff. For example, back in the 80s, we would take Arms Law and Claw Law and use that as the combat system, and then we would take the magic system from the fantasy trip, and we would have encounter tables from Chivalry and Sorcery, and we would just call it D&D. Everything back then was much more of a hodgepodge than you have today, where it's in the book. And I think a lot of that is because it has those separated systems. Obviously there's interconnections, but hit points, scale, and so forth. But you can remove a system wholesale and replace it with something else, and it doesn't break something over here. In fifth edition, because it has that unified mechanic, and this goes back to third, because it has that unified mechanic, if you try to mess with it over here, you could very easily break something over here and not even realize it for 3 weeks, for 3 months of game time. And that's why I like first, personally. Let's see where we got here. First edition, second edition. Yes, Nick. Yeah, please do. I believe you can find them on the aftermarket for not much money on eBay and some of the Facebook groups and such. So yeah, definitely keep an eye out for those. Yeah, Mark. See, welcome back, Mark. And this, yeah, it's the subsystem thing. But another part of 1E, and this isn't mechanically, you're not mechanically required to do it this way, but I personally enjoy a more sandboxy and exploratory approach to the game. And you see this in some of the 1E mechanics, right? You've got you've got dwarves can detect new construction. Gnomes can detect distance underground, or whatever the specifics are. But the point is, those abilities and a lot of the spells and magic items are specifically designed and don't make any sense outside of the context of a mega dungeon, what we call a mega dungeon today, a big dungeon of multiple levels with tricks and traps and elevator rooms and sloping passages. Those assumptions are built in to 1E, and you don't see those assumptions built into later versions. And I like those assumptions because I like that style of play. I want to be able to do an exploratory game. Now, you can do an exploratory game in 5th edition, but the rules, while they don't exactly fight you, they certainly don't help you either. And 5th edition is it's obviously much more designed for a plot-driven adventure style rather than an exploratory or hex crawl type of style. Which is not to say you can't play an exploratory game with 5e. You absolutely can. In fact, if you're interested in doing that, I highly recommend 5 Torches Deep, which is basically takes the core mechanics of 5e and turns them into an old school exploratory deadly game. So it absolutely can be done. It's not its default. And I kind of like the idea that 1E defaults to the style of play that I personally enjoy. Whereas 5e, I don't mind 5e. I play 5e. I like it. I like it as a game, but it's not the same. And another thing about first edition, I think first edition lends itself better to a very long-term campaign. 5th edition, I mean, they've done studies, games of 5th campaign, what they call a campaign of 5th edition doesn't last more than 6 months. Because from the standpoint of 5th edition, a campaign is really what I would call a story arc, or 2. And that's very much at odds with the assumptions back in the first edition era in the 70s and the 80s, where the campaign was defined by the continuity of the player characters. And you wouldn't have the same player characters necessarily involved in every session. But because you had this continuity of this pool of players and characters, that defined the campaign, not the story that was being followed. And again, I gravitate to the version that makes the same assumptions as I prefer to play. Let's see here now. Style of 1E, yes. Nordic Maelstrom, Lockmar. Love Greyhawk Ruins. Yes, Greyhawk Ruins is. I find I like it better as time goes on. I should do a video about Greyhawk Ruins specifically. Um, yeah, Nick, the weapons modifiers against armor class is a perfect example. You can use it or not, and that's a perfect example of something that you can just take out wholesale. If you tried to do that with some element of the 5e combat system, maybe take out conditions, you would be in a bit, you would be hard pressed to make that work. Oh, GURPS. Oh, yes. GURPS is the kind of game that ends up being much better for the source books. They had source books about frickin' everything, and I collected a zillion of them. I had this dream of doing this grand sci-fi game campaign. So I had Transhuman Space and the Ogre one. I still have the Ogre one. And a whole, all the time travel one. I had all these different things, and then of course you had to have. I had a whole bunch of the fantasy ones and the historical ones. I mean, they're great source books. I honestly, personally, just never cared for the system. It just seemed rather fiddly to me. But that's personal preference. Jay Jr., welcome aboard. Original to the white box with the 3 books. Yeah, exactly. The same idea. You can hack everything. Works with the white box, absolutely. In fact, that's back in the day. And I came into D&D just a little after this, but I got in early enough that I still could get the echoes of it in my play. You had zines like Alarums and Excursions, which is still around, but it was much more experimental back in the day. You had D&D material being published in things like diplomacy zines, and hell, you had the Arduin Grimoire was basically it pretended to be its own system, but it was basically supplements for the little brown books. And Gary did not like that one little bit. Let's see. The 5e Nordic Maelstrom. The reason 5e games don't last long is because the power level. That is entirely true. You can play a first edition game for years before you get up to really sick levels of power. A 12th level character in first edition is pretty much, a powerful character. And you'd have to play way beyond that to get to levels where you can even cast like 7th level spells as a magic user. Whereas, 5th edition, you're very powerful very early on. And I think that's a very, very good point about the power level. John Zydek, I hope I pronounced that correctly. Castle Zagig is a better version. I would agree entirely, and if they had continued with the series, it would be my go-to. But because Gary's Widow pulled the license from the Trolls, we don't have that now. We have, and you're going to spend hundreds of dollars trying to find a copy of that box set. I wish it was around. I wish it had been continued and finished, but it wasn't. So we got to play with what we got. And, one level of dungeon does not a mega dungeon make, unfortunately. Fortunately, Castle of Mad Archmage, is, does it was my homage to Castle Greyhawk and Castle Zagig. So let's see. Ryan, you like the style of 1E, but the mechanics of 5E. Fair enough. Oh God, here, Patrick. This is my box of unpainted 15 mil figures. Those are just the 15 mil figures. The 25 mil figures are over there, and the 6mm are down there. So yes, I have quite a few and unpainted minis. So yes, as a matter of fact, I'm afraid I do. Dr. Howard. Oh yes, that would be very cool. the divine effect system. Ryan Matthews, want to play Hero? Yeah, I honestly never got into it. I had it at one point, just never went through with it. I got a bunch of games like that. Nordic Maelstrom, does anyone know where you can view old Dragon magazines? Yes. And I believe this is actually legal. If you go to archive.org, I believe they have legal copies of Dragon and Strategic Review and Polyhedron and that kind of thing. I assume it's legal because it's, a not, they're not hiding it, and it's not like it's not the kind of place like uh, like what was it called, the Evil Eye or something, where you would download bootleg PDFs of stuff. It's it feels like it's not illegal. So I would say check out archive.org to see if you can find what you're looking for there. Nordic Maelstrom, what do I paint in 6 mil? Ogre, Steve Jackson Ogre GEV. I've got a ton of the old metal minis. I've got more of the new plastic minis. I collect other sci-fi armor figures to use with Ogre. So I'm a big Ogre GEV fan, and I just that's my 6 mil fix. I keep wanting to get into micro armor, but it's just such an investment, and I have not found a rule system that is easy enough for my poor old brain to use. Old school, welcome back, welcome aboard. You play AD&D 2.75 with some things like early editions, like cantrips, exactly. And exactly, the second edition is flexible as well. I don't think it's quite as flexible. Things are a little bit more smooth and integrated with two. I mean, witness what happened when they had those black books that kind of broke stuff. Because they thought they could just make changes over here, and it broke something over here. But on the whole, if you know what you're doing, you can do that well. A lot of kits and things, afford lots of opportunities for customization. Oh yeah. What are my thoughts? 15 mil. Well, Patrick, I'll get to you in a second. What about 15 mil? Nordic Maelstrom. 15 is what I'm using for my Greyhawk armies. These, that's what all these guys are. I've got a whole bunch. You might have seen on the channel. I've been doing some play tests with my fantasy armies in Greyhawk. Those are all 15s, and that's what I'm going to be using to run convention games at. So, Patrick, thoughts on 6th edition? I assume by that you mean 1D&D. Well, let's see how to put this. I don't think it's going to be nearly as successful as Wizards of the Coast things. I think that their attempt, because what they're doing with 1D&D is not a rules update per se. What they want to do is nudge everybody into an online digital subscription model. That's really their goal. They don't care about rules changes. The rules changes that you're seeing on there are not are insignificant in terms of Wizards of the Coast's ultimate goal, which is to increase their revenue streams. And I'm just guessing, I have no insight into what's going on in their minds. I can see what they're doing. They want you to get that digital subscription and use their online VTT, and so that they can get a subscription price out of you every month, rather than you buying a book and never buying anything again. And I think that's going to rub a lot of people the wrong way. There's still a lot of people, I think, even in the 5e crowd, who like the fact that it uses a face-to-face across the table interaction. And I think a lot of people are going to turn their nose up at the idea of, well, now you're not using that. That now the game is much more digital. It's much more online. Now, I know a lot of people prefer PDFs for books and stuff like that. That's one thing, but they're going into another direction of the subscription model. And I know it's the golden goose. It's what every company wants. I'm not sure it's going to work, and I think they're going to lose at least some of the goodwill that they've gotten from 5th edition, which has been enormously popular and enormously profitable for them. But they see their future in digital, computerized games. And you look no further than who they appointed as the new president. He used to work for Microsoft. That's what they want. Cutter Jockey, thank you so much, Cutter Jockey. Again, every month you do this, it is really helpful. It really makes a difference when you when you make those little donations like that. And same for you, Dr. Howard. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Satori, the Partha miniatures, those are actually the Partha miniatures were the best miniatures back in the 80s, right? They were very finely detailed sculpts. They were good. They were very crisp and clean sculpts, and you can still buy them. You can buy the old Partha figures from Iron Wind Metals online. They're still available. They're using either the original molds or casts taken from the original molds. Some of the same people are even still involved. So Iron Wind Metals, if you're looking for the Ral Parthas. And in fact, you can also still get many of the old Grenadiers. There's a place in Italy. I forget the name of it, but if you Google, Fantasy Lord Miniatures Italy, you'll find it. Because that's the line that they use. And in fact, you can still get the minifigs. Those ugly, just like they're not really well detailed. But the old minifigs are also still being produced, at least most of them. They had a World of Greyhawk line, and they had the Valley of the Five Winds. Those are all still being produced over in England. And I think if you just Google for minifigs UK, you'll find it. And it's listed on their website under classic 25 millimeter fantasy, I think is the thing over on the right. So, all right. So I'm going to catch up here on the D&D next thing. I'm less concerned about the socio-political changes that people are perceiving in the game. The change from race to species and removing, the gypsy folk from Ravenloft and taking, making changes to them and all that, the Vistani. I know, I'm aware of them, obviously. I think those changes are insignificant compared to the change from a books across a table model to a you're going to pay us every month to play over a computer. I think that is infinitely more significant than changing the term race to species or any of those other things. I think those are peripheral. They're certain. It's not that they don't exist, but compared to that paradigm shift that Wizards of the Coast is attempting to implement, I don't think they're nearly as important. That's just my own. I know a lot of people are really upset about it. I get it. I'm not. For me, it's more about pushing to the subscription model. That's more important. And that is the bigger change that you have to keep your eye on the ball. Let's see what we got. Ryan, they should go back to the cheaper folio adventures. I tend to agree. I was selling my folio adventure, my 10 to 16 page adventures, and people were badgering me. Why isn't this available in 5th edition? I want something I can play that takes 1 or 2 sessions to play. Because everything that Wizards of the Coast sells takes, weeks and, a dozen different sessions because it's a book. They don't sell adventures. They sell books, adventure paths. So yes, I concur. I think they're leaving money on the table by not doing the smaller stuff. But, I think I'm probably going to start moving into that space with the small, converting my stuff into 5th edition to meet that need. Yeah, a couple of people. If you look, Rubens, if you look on YouTube, there's a couple of people who've made that, who are starting to make that same comparison. Professor Dungeon Master came out with a video a couple days ago, and I know somebody else made a similar assertion. I think it remains to be seen. I think in a way it's kind of ironic because a lot of it will depend on the success of this D&D movie coming out next March. I think if it's good, I think it will buoy them and help keep a lot of that goodwill. If it sucks, I think it'll just hasten the decline. But they have a chance if the Chris Pine movie is good, and I loved the trailer. If it's fun and good, and if it feels like an old Phase 1 or Phase 2 Marvel movie, I think they could do really well with it, and I think that would help bolster them in the fact of this. Thank you so much, Satori. I really appreciate it. Weggy, thank you again. Thank you also. Thank you all so much for the tips in the tip jar. It really, really does help. Every dollar I get from you guys directly is a dollar I don't have to get from selling stuff, and that means I have more time to write the free stuff for the blog. Pasquale 369, welcome aboard. Played D&D in Okinawa on Kadena. Oh, Kadena, yes. I was in the Air Force in the early '90s, so I've heard stories about Kadena. Loved it, but took you in other places. Now this is the time to do it. You can get the old books on Drive-Thru RPG. The 1st edition books are available, I believe, in print on demand, if I'm not mistaken. If not, they're certainly in PDF, and you can get a set of books on the aftermarket for not too expensive if you're not worried about the condition. With the advent of pro DMs running games online, pro DMs. I mean, I've actually been paid to DM, but that was a face-to-face across the table thing. It's certainly not something I can make a living at. It'd be interesting. I have not really heard that, but that's an interesting idea that the pro DMs running online games. I'm not really sure how that feeds into Wizards of the Coast's profit center, though. Unless those pro DMs are somehow licensed and there's some sort of requirement, all your players must use the VTT and stuff like that. Because make no mistake, Wizards of the Coast wants the money. They don't want the money to go. They don't want to do a one and done. They don't want to sell you a book and never see you again. They're figuring out ways that they can get you on the treadmill, not on every couple of years when they come out with a new edition, but every single month. They want that sweet World of Warcraft money. That's what they want. If they got $9.95 from every person in the planet who plays D&D, they would be doing very well, and that's their goal, I think. Yeah, Satori, exactly, with the cheeseburger comment. We are coming up on time. We didn't obviously get to the topic, so we'll keep that on the shelf for next time. In the meantime, any last thoughts? Bud, hello. Wizards of the Coast doesn't really seem to be interested in acquiring a lot of IPs because they don't really need to. They come with an enormous amount of IP built in already. They can do the synergy between their products and other either Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro products. We're starting to see the crossovers between D&D and Magic the Gathering. Even though Magic the Gathering seems to be faltering. I don't follow it all that much, but enough has penetrated my bubble. There's serious things. I mean, you're talking about like investors are complaining that the cards aren't appreciating in value. That's got to be chilling for them. But they do have they do have that synergy internally, so they don't really need to focus on external things all that much. And don't forget, Modifius just lost the Conan license. It went to another publisher. So I forget who, but yeah, they made the announcement last week. So those kinds of things are always transitory. They're always shifting around and moving. I mean, look how many Star Trek RPGs there've been. So I don't think that that's something that you can rely on for a evergreen source of income, unless you completely luck out like Task Force Games and get a license in perpetuity that for a product for an IP that at the time wasn't worth very much, but it blossomed into Star Trek, and so they're riding high on that for forever. Tristan, hello from the UK. Well, good to see you. We are, in fact, just wrapping up, however. Pasquale, sorry to ask, what happens to K-Source did you mention? I'm sorry, Pasquale, I don't know what you're asking. I apologize. Did you mean Drive-Through RPG that has the first edition books? I'm not really sure, so just let me know. So Ryan, they pay the license for D&D Beyond, and the players will have to buy their content with microtransactions to get. Yeah, well, that's that too. The microtransactions, so that your character figure in the VTT, has cool looking armor and has an ocelot pet or whatever. That's part and parcel of the whole thing. They want you on that treadmill. They want that subscription. They want those microtransactions. You're entirely right. The default setting is the IP. Exactly. Well, the default setting is right now Forgotten Realms. So that's an enormous IP. I got into Dragonlance in a big way when it first came out. Yeah. I ran the modules, read all the books, loved it. But it, once you've run the adventures, it kind of leaves you stale. There's not much, at least back in the day, there wasn't much else to do in Krynn. Obviously later on they added a whole bunch of different things and the box sets with the Minotaur lands and stuff. But, at the time it kind of like, yeah, these were a lot of fun. Now what? It kind of left you. Now, Tristan, I apologize. Yeah, it would, we will be coming back obviously in a month. So, but I've got to go make some dinner and such. So just wrapping up here. If Hasbro WotC would publish individual modules, yeah, probably. Yeah, yes, Mr. McFisto, welcome. By the way, yeah, by definition, by design, they were railroading. They were intended to be. They were telling a very specific story that followed the novels, and the novels were so enormously successful, that at the time it worked. They just couldn't replicate it. They had that. It was that one and done. They had a huge wave with it, and then it went nowhere. And that's a great shame. Tony, welcome. I'm just glad you were here for a little bit of it. It's good to see you. Sorry that you're coming in as we're wrapping up, but I'm going to give folks another minute or two. Any last questions or comments? Let's see what we got here. Have I missed any good things? Alrighty. Alrighty. So I'm gonna call it. So have a great evening, everybody. I hope you had fun with this. We'll do the module thing at some other point. I'll give it a try in January, but this was fun. I love just talking with you guys. It's a great fun. Apologize again for the weirdness at the beginning and the movement of URLs, but it seems to have worked out. We had a nice crew, and I will talk to you all later. Have a great week. Have a great weekend, and great gaming, everybody. Had a lot of fun.